Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello and welcome to the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on the Believe Network. I am the coach, Shannon Griffith, and I thank you for joining me here this evening. A couple 24 hours away from Christmas Eve, and of course, Christmas was right around the corner. I hope everyone is having a safe and happy holiday season wherever you may be. If you're traveling, safe travels to your family, and anyone else that's traveling a part of your family, may they have safe travels to and from the destinations that they are going. But it's that time of year where we give thanks for where we're at, and I don't think there's any better time than to do that tonight to kind of wrap up this historic 2024 season for the Indiana Hoosiers, being 11-1 overall, got into the college football playoffs. Did not go as the way we wanted it to go, but then again, it's one of those things that sometimes happens, and you have to live with it and move on. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Want to talk about Bet Online, our sponsor for tonight's show. Bet Online continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, from the earliest odds to in-game live betting. BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds, everything from the college football playoffs to the bowl games happening now, and the NFL, NBA, and college basketball, NHL, and UFC. Head to BetOnline today. Don't forget to use the promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your welcome bonus, your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. And again, I want to thank all our affiliates that are a part of the Hoosier Tailgate. Remember, if you would happen to get something from them via our link tree or even our online store that you can find at HoosierTailgate.com, we do get a little bit of a commission for those sales that you would happen to purchase using our code. We greatly appreciate that in advance, and but we appreciate all the affiliates that have been a part of this year's Hoosier Football Tailgate. And remember, if you are in the chat rooms, whether it be Facebook, YouTube, or X, by all means, if you have a question about something as we go along here, by all means, put it in the box, and we will answer them as best as we can. As we get into talking about the season in general. But first, we got to talk about the loss up at Notre Dame on Friday night, a game that I was able to get to and be in attendance, which was a nice thing. And what a scene there at Notre Dame Stadium on the campus of Notre Dame. A great venue to watch a college football game. I know it was chilly and cold that night, as we thought it would be, but the atmosphere was electric, and you got to appreciate college football on a grand stage like Indiana was against Notre Dame on Friday night. A couple things that, I mean, from my perspective, bothered me a little bit about things that were definitely a part of the game, some things that weren't a part of the game. I know that Coach Cignetti has been taking a lot of fire for a lot of things, and some justifiably so in some respects, because I think there were some things that may have not shown well Friday, with him being on the set of College Game Day prior to kickoff. I know that's a segment they've done with coaches during the year, but it's usually done well before the kickoff and things of that nature. But I didn't think that served Indiana or Coach Sig in a positive light, because I think it was very obvious to the ESPN crew that Indiana maybe should not have been there. from their viewpoint, and I know Nick Saban's viewpoint on that was pretty evident as well. I know he made a comment to Cignetti after Coach Cignetti had answered a question about what did he learning under Coach Saban, and after he kind of rattled off the things that he has utilized throughout his coaching career, Saban, made a comment about there was one thing that he didn't learn from him, and was that his talking shit all the time was not something that he had learned from Nick Saban. Why I think for those around the set, maybe I thought that was just a little bit of a levity moment to lighten up the room. I don't think it came across the way it was intended, because I didn't really like Nick Saban's demeanor when he said that, and almost in some childish way of reprimanding a former coach of his that he says too much. So I didn't think that served Indiana very well, that he was in that environment prior to the game. I know all publicity is good publicity, and being on there, I know Sig probably felt that he had to kind of defend the record of Indiana, but at that point in time, I just don't think it was a necessary thing for him to do. Let the action on the field speak for itself. And then, unfortunately, Indiana didn't play very well. Defensively, I thought had their moments. I thought they played pretty effectively in the game outside of the one big 98-yard touchdown run. Offensively, I just didn't understand their game plan. I didn't think it was something that, I don't know. I think it left a lot to be desired. Now, some of that was Notre Dame, but I don't think we had a game plan that was going to do some things, especially in the passing game. We never tried to run any crossing routes against Notre Dame's man-to-man coverage. Everything was to the outside, with a few exceptions of hitting the quick slant that they've done all year. But, they got into the 50-50 ball game on the outside, which I knew if they were going to do that, it wasn't going to be good. Even though Surratt pulled one down, and then Cooper pulled one down inside the red zone where it was a more desirable position to do that. But I just didn't think the game plan I just didn't understand what they were trying to do. I mean, it just didn't. I know as a play caller, sometimes when you're trying something and you're not getting the response that you would expect to get in terms of a play, where it doesn't go anywhere or it gets blown up, it does get compounding harder as it goes on to make play calls in that regard. So that may have played a part in it. I thought at times it showed, even though Coach Shanahan has been doing this now for a couple of years, I think that game did show a little bit of the inexperience of being a play caller, because it just didn't jive with some of the things that I think that they could have done to give themselves a better chance. But again, that would be my only criticism of the game. And again, some of it's Notre Dame. So, I mean, Notre Dame was really good. And I said this in the leading up to it, what I thought it was going to take for Indiana to win the ball game. They didn't establish a run game. They weren't close to 150 yards. They didn't get to the 24 points or the 275. And then, of course, they really didn't hold Notre Dame to a lot of their stats, especially 20 points. Love was a beast. We knew that going into it. You give him an inch, you can take it a mile, and that's why I ran it back to the to the house on the 98-yard one, and they did not win the money down battle on third downs. Indiana was consistently behind the chains, which Notre Dame wanted to be on defense. They wanted them behind the chains and had to convert a lot of third and longs, and then Notre Dame on the flip side had a lot of third and mediums and shorts, and that was the primary difference in the ball game. the 98-yard run came off of a bad decision on the throw by Curtis, throwing into double coverage that led to the interception. That play on top of the 98-yard touchdown run, which came on the very next play, essentially was a 14-point turnaround. And when those things happen like that, it's an uphill battle from that point forward, because you blow an opportunity to get points and then you give up points. And because of somebody being out of their responsibilities in their gap, that's why that play went for a 98-yard touchdown. Pure and simple. It had nothing to do with, other than the fact D lineman was in the wrong gap, and that's why it split. So, I think when they got the big play to Surratt, and they went to a faster tempo to try to catch Notre Dame, maybe being in their nickel coverage or whatever, I didn't necessarily think coming right back with a throw was, in my opinion, the right call. I would have ran the football on that play. But again, it's easy to second guess after you've had a couple days to think about it and rewatch some things and do some things like that. But hey, at the end of the day, they got beat. They didn't play to the expectations that I think everybody thought they would. They had some of the same problems again with Notre Dame that they had against Ohio State and the second half of Michigan, especially on offense. When teams started creating havoc and everything that went to it, Indiana faced a combination of a four-man front with blitzing linebackers, whether it be bringing five blitzers or six, and especially run situations and playing man on the outside. They just didn't have enough of an answer. And that was what I was disappointed with, because they had been with that before and didn't come up with any type of crossing routes or rub routes to try to get the ball in and out of Curtis's hands, number one, and then get it into the space to let the receivers go do their thing, like Williams and Price could do. So, again, second guessing, armchair quarterback, however you want to look at it. Those are some of the things that stuck out in my mind from that game as I jotted down notes as I went through it. I just thought there were some things that I just didn't think served Indiana well, both on and off the field prior to the game, and then also during the game with what they were doing offensively. And Notre Dame hit some big plays. Like we said, you had to have a couple chunk yardage plays, and they were able to do it and do a good job of it in that regard. And I would say with that, Brad, I appreciate your comment there, and appreciate that aspect of what you thought with everything. So appreciate all that with your comment. So thank you very much about the season. And I thank every one of you guys that were here each and every week listening to me try to give my opinion or expertise on what I thought was going to have to happen on a Saturday and reviewing it on a Monday. But again, having watched Notre Dame and having watched Ohio State, I don't think there's any question that Ohio State is the better team between those two. I do think Indiana, in the right set of circumstances, could beat Notre Dame, because I just don't think Notre Dame was that much better than Indiana. They were that night per se. And some of that, it's a hostile environment to go play at Notre Dame. Let's face facts. I mean, you're on the road. You're playing in a hostile environment. You're playing against not only Notre Dame, but all the Catholics that are in and around the stadium and all that stuff. But it's a tough place to go play. It just is. And Notre Dame did a good job. I thought Al Golden did a good job. And then Denbrock had, what I expected him to do, and try to not put Riley Leonard in bad situations and We got that tip ball interception on that first drive. And, man, I thought, man, if we could go down here now and get points, this could be a good sign. And unfortunately, we went down and turned it over and then gave up the 98-yarder. So, anyway, enough on that game. It frustrated me in that regard, but we'll come back to some of the other thoughts on that here in a moment. Again, if you guys got questions about anything, by all means, please participate. Doesn't bother me to answer a question, even if it's off topic. No biggie for me in that regard. Biggest surprise out of that game, I guess, is that Taven Jackson has entered the portal. I hate to see it. I don't know what was behind the scenes and him coming to this decision about not wanting to come back and move on to another place, whether it was encouraged. I don't know if that was the case or he just felt it was time for a change of scenery. But I find it very odd that the one quarterback that has all the experience and, for the most part, the heir apparent to the number one quarterback position all of a sudden decides to leave. So there's something there that precipitated his decision to leave. And my only thing with Taven is he's got a lot of athletic ability. He throws a great football. He's got great technique and can really spin it. His biggest thing is mental. It is the things that have held him back from becoming that top-tiered quarterback that you need to have in the Big Ten, and that's what separated Curtis Rourke from him. So I hope, wish Taven the best of luck. We're down to 2 redshirt freshmen with Tyler Cherry and Alberto Mendoza. I know his brother Fernando, it seems or appears that he's in the picture, but we're going to have more than just those 3 in that regard. But, hey, it is what it is, and that's the way it's set up. The kids can transfer, and it won't be the only surprise because you'll go through this December and then we head into spring ball. And then after spring ball, you have another one, which can also kind of be the topsy-turvy of everything. So disappointed, but understand it and wish Taven the best because I do think he's a class kid. It's just that things, for whatever reason, weren't aligning to what he had thought. And he decided to take a pass and move on to the next chapter. But good news, Aiden Fisher coming back for another year. We got Surratt back. There are several guys that Indiana is going to have back next year that I was kind of calculating for the most part from what I was seeing. I'm trying to see if I've got it handy or not, but they do have I think a pretty good core of that. So yeah, I think it's a pretty safe bet in that regard that there is that possibility of a new quarterback coming in there. Let's see if I can pull that up there or not. I don't know if it's going to pull it with everything, but there we go. Unfortunately, that's me. Doesn't help. Let me see if I can pull yours up there. There we go. Yes, and I said that I think it's pretty safe to say that they have a really great chance at Fernando. Alberto's brother. I think that's a definite possibility for Indiana with that. But I'm trying to see here. Wide receiver wise, Elijah Surratt, and then you got Kobe and Cooper coming back, and then EJ Williams coming out of the back into the portal from the portal. So I think that's a good aspect of things. You got Carter Smith back. And let's see here. I think Drew Evans is back, but I'm not positive on that one. But their offensive line, there'll probably be pieces there. Their defensive line as well as they go. Let's see here. I'm trying to pull up a. Yeah, Steve. The question mark is what Kidwell does. Nick Kidwell, who got injured before the season, whether he comes back, Tyler Stevens, and all those up front. We'll have to wait and see there. Defensively, I do with Aiden Fisher coming back. That's a key component. It'll be interesting to see what D'Angelo does, but I expect him to come back. So I do think they'll have a pretty good roster of guys coming back. I wish Elijah Green would not have decided to transfer because I do think he added an element at running back, but we got the Hemby kid from Maryland. That was a big get, and I do think that will pay dividends at some point as well with everything. But having Aiden back, that's a key component of this defense and what it brought to the table. They were Aiden Fisher's leadership is second to none. And I do think that's a huge component being back. Having Surratt back on the outside will be huge as well. So I do think the pieces of the puzzle will be there. Now, whether the young pups that are coming up through the system step into some roles and they won't need to go out and find a portal guy for certain positions, I think that would be a key component. And then bringing in portal guys that really fit the need of that position, like they did with the tight end from Wisconsin that they got coming in. I think that's a huge get as well for the offense. So we'll see what all transpires here over the next couple of weeks with the portal. I know that everything is locked down now with the holidays for a couple of weeks, and they won't be able to pick back up until after the January period. So we'll see what all happens. Fernando did visit Georgia. So he's Georgia, Indiana. It will be out at Missouri because the kid from Penn State went to Missouri and canceled all his things to Indiana. So we'll see what remains there in the portal that Indiana may be able to pick up prior to the start of the second semester, which I think will be key. And those are the things that, hey, you got to feel that they do have enough of a nucleus back that it's not going to be a wholesale change. But, you know, we're going to lose some good ones too. But that's, like I said, graduation is healthy. It provides a new outlook, even coming off a year like you had now. There's that tendency to want to spring forward and get yourself in a position to replicate what you went through this year, because that winning feeling is contagious, and just like losing is. And kids now know what it takes. And that's the key component that Coach Signetti and his staff were able to do, and how they handled things from the time they arrived until the first, kickoff of a football game occurred. They handled a way to show these kids on what it was going to take to win, as did the James Madison transfers as well. So good that Aiden's back. There'll probably be some more as we go along. That's not to say that Taven Jackson is not coming back. You just never know. They go into the portal. He may not find what he's looking for, and he may figure that he's better off staying right here and being in a competitive environment at Indiana. I don't know. I don't know the scenario or the things that are around him in that regard that are doing it. But, hey, good luck to Taven, and I'm glad we got Aiden back, because I like the way that kid plays. I like the way he talks and handles himself. I just think he's a dynamite leader of the football team, irregardless of position. I just think he carries a lot of weight in the locker room, and I think kids follow him. And I think that's the important component as we move forward here. When you look at this year, what can we say? I mean, we started talking about this year end of July and August, even with my buddy Jim Coyle on the Indiana Sports Beat Radio Network that I join every Thursday, and will continue to do that irregardless of the season. We went through the schedule and we said there's a legit way to get to 6 games. And then we looked at it and thought, hey, it's very plausible this team could be 7-8-0 as they move through their season. We knew that if they went 6-0 prior to playing Nebraska, it gave them a big shot in the arm, and that's what it did. So at the end of the day, when we looked at that schedule, even though at first when you saw Nebraska, you saw the runner-up in Washington and the national championship team in Michigan, and you saw those all relatively clustered together with an Ohio State in there, everybody looked at it and said, hey, if they would be an 8-4, 7-5 team, boy, you couldn't argue with that first year out of the gate. Well, lo and behold, they got on a run and they had that feeling of not being beat. And unfortunately, at the Ohio State game, they gave 14 points away in a game that I would think, and most people from what we've heard over the last 24 hours, that they felt Indiana gave them the better game of them in Tennessee, which I think is probably true. This team finishing at 11-1, being highly ranked, they had no control over the schedule that they had at all. They played the schedule that the Big Ten had dealt them, and what Scott Dolson had did from a non-conference perspective. And he set this staff and these kids up for success, and they were able to go out and achieve it, because you still have to go between the white lines and play the game. Nothing's for sure. And subjectivity, in my opinion, is very difficult to have in the game of football, because you just don't know what's going to happen during a 60-minute game, where turnovers and things of that magnitude play a big part in determining who may or may not win a game. So again, the fact that this team out of the gate went 11-1 was a remarkable historical year. And Coach Cignetti's been rightfully given Coach of the Year honors. They redid his contract. And there's nothing there that doesn't something that they did not earn. And I think from A to Z, just like Rourke was the nation's best efficiency passer, is attributed to that kid. And, for what they were able to do with a kid that came out of the Mid-American Conference school and had all the ability in front of him, and he came in, learned the system, and he was a difference maker for Indiana. There's no way to put it that kid was a difference maker, and that's why Indiana had the season they did offensively. So from that standpoint, historical year. Will go down as, the season overall, 11-2, playing in the national first round of the playoffs for the first year that it was put into place. And people will talk about this year all the way throughout history, because it had that type of impact on the institution. It had that impact on the community at large, and had a huge impact on the program. And that's the one thing that winning football teams gives an institution like Indiana. It becomes lightning in a bottle. Things go up. Businesses are more involved because their profits are going up because of what the football team's doing. 8 home games served the community very well with all the hotels and food chains and things like that. And then as the year went on and Indiana remained undefeated, all of a sudden now the last 4 games or so was a sellout crowd. There was no tickets available. And that all happened. That's the crazy thing. That all happened. And the Purdue game, which Indiana was a heavy favorite. It was snowy. It was cold. It was filled up to the top of the stands when that game started. And you could see the energy that provided the football team and the kids on the field because they played lights out. And that's what you will remember about this year, how it gave Indiana football something that it's been clamoring to have for a long, long time. And I don't know how you guys in the watching right now feel and how that, summarization from my perspective is something that you also share, but it was definitely something to see, and how the Hoosiers were an important facet and not just we're close, or we lost 5 games by 6 points or less. That's gone. It's more about 11-2, and we had the biggest winning margin of all teams in the Big Ten or in the nation. It was crazy how big of the winning margin was. They destroyed teams that they played outside of the 2 that they lost to, and you can't take that away from them at all. So, tip of the hat to Coach Signetti and the staff, and to, I think, the biggest group. You have to learn to crawl before you can walk, and vice versa. That's exactly right. The thing that Sig did, he had that on speed control, because he went from crawling to running pretty quick. In that regard. Let's see here, Brad. Something different about this team from the start. Yeah, I just think the way they carried himself, or the way Signetti talked about it, I think the kids bought into it. I think he felt that the kids felt that they had his back, and vice versa. And but again, you had some key components in those lineups that made a difference. The linebackers, D'Angelo Pons at corner. You had Lawton and Ellison that were pretty good running backs. And then, of course, Curtis Rourke and what he brought to the table as a big-time quarterback. I mean, that's the thing. You can go right down the line. The teams that have the most success have some of the top quarterbacks playing. And it's a very true segment of the game that always rings true. It starts at the quarterback position. So, but yeah, great season overall. Like I said, congratulations to Coach Signetti. Congratulations to the kids for their effort. I'm happy to see, like, from Mike Kadick, who stuck it out for good, him going into the NFL because he wanted a taste of what winning would be like at Indiana, and having that come to fruition for him was a pretty special thing to see, because that kid is a winner, and he'll get his shot in the NFL, just like I believe Curtis will get his shot in the NFL, and some other guys out of this group. But like I said, congrats to all of them. Coach Shanahan, what he did offensively, Coach Haynes and the defense and what they did, leading, number 1 rush defense in the country. I don't think that is anything to laugh about. I think that is a huge, huge sentiment, because I never had seen or thought Indiana would have a defense that was the number 1 ranked rush defense in the country. Was Tino the main coach with the quarterbacks and affect the quarterbacks there? Well, yeah, Tino was been with Coach Signetti for a couple of years. He came with him from James Madison. Very good coach, very detailed-oriented coach. He was a big part of what they game planned and how that game plan went week in, week out. He did a good job of teaching the quarterbacks. I thought that's the key component of training their eyes and things like that. And yes, they replaced Tino with a gentleman that's coming from the NFL, the Atlanta Falcons. I think Whitmer's his last name. He played at Illinois. And he has a pretty strong background of working with top-level quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think he's going to lend another boost to the staff and potential recruits or portal quarterbacks coming in and wanting to go to the NFL. And I think having him with the NFL experience will bode well in that category, on top of his strong background in developing quarterbacks. I think that's going to be a big component of it. And he's very highly regarded in the NFL circles. And hey, he's a guy that I think will make Indiana better in terms of what Coach Sig had said, that when you lose this coach, you go out and get another one, and you find somebody that's better, that maybe gives you something that maybe you're lacking. And I think he'll bring a different mindset maybe in the passing game as well. But I think it's a great addition, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes and everything. So that was a key thing that I think, getting that type of caliber kid to come in, and, you know, having played in the Big Ten like he did, he understands it. And Indiana next year will have Oregon and Penn State, and they don't have Ohio State or Michigan, but they're not going to have an easy schedule either. It'll be a little bit more of a test, but hey, that's it. That's the Big Ten. You play what, you know, they put out in that regard. All right. Last couple things here that I wanted to hit real quick before we bid adieu with everything. And again, I appreciate everyone that every week you were here on these lives. It's something that we started doing as opposed to having a recording out when, if it was feasible for me to do it and didn't interfere with my day job, I did a live. So in that regard, I am grateful for that aspect of things. Kurt Herbstreit, Paul Feinbaum, Nick Saban, you can add it all in. I'll say this, when it comes to something like this, I am a Kurt Herbstreit fan. I like Kurt Herbstreit. I believe some of the things that he says are pretty dead on. And what he said, whether it was Saturday morning or in the evening, left a lot to be desired. And I don't think it came off very well in what he said during the game about First Take, and then, of course, making the statement about Indiana and SMU, with everything in that regard. So I don't like Paul Feinbaum. Never have, never will. He is a guy that knows nothing of what he speaks of. All he is a Alabama homer, has been and always will be, and he's an SEC guy from through and through. The fact that he has a large mouthpiece to speak from is something that I've never liked. I just don't think he serves anybody but himself in the SEC. And I don't think Nick Saban can be neutral when it comes to things that involve the SEC. I just don't think that's even humanly possible. I think he's biased. I'm not saying his bias is not warranted, but his bias for the SEC is very, very much on display each and every week. And I just don't think it serves a narrative that's very, very, very good. But I was disappointed in what Kurt Herbstreit said about what he thought Indiana should not have been a team that's in the playoffs. At the end of the day, they had the closest margin of victory than any team that played in the playoffs. They had one of the best defense in the Big Ten. So to me, if you're saying they were outclassed, then I just don't think you have a very good set of eyes. I just don't. I just think it was an asinine statement to make. And if they've got an axe to grind because they're buddies with Lane Kiffin and they're buddies with whoever, Kellen DeBoer at Alabama, or, who pick one team in the SEC. And here's the thing, and I think, Brad, you alluded to this. I think here's what has got to happen moving forward, and hopefully the committee will address this and say what they need to say and be very specific in their language so there's no innuendo. One, I do think they have to adjust the seating. I don't think the way they've got it now with the automatic bids and such serves in that regard. So I do think there's some tweaking there, which I believe the vast majority of people agree with in that regard. I'm glad Boise gets a shot at the table, but do I think Boise deserves a bye? No, I don't think Boise deserves a bye. Nor do I think Arizona State would have deserved a bye, because their record wasn't, I know they won their conference and such, and I don't want to take anything away from them because they're playing good, but I just don't think it warranted in the field of 12 a bye. So I do think they've got to adjust some of that and moving it forward to do what they need to do. Now, when it comes to what a team has to do to get in, and this is where I differ with Kurt Herbstreit. At some point in the selection process, or how you're going to evaluate these teams, there has to be a cutoff for a team that has lost 3 or more games. Because if that doesn't factor into the equation, then playing the season doesn't count. And I know what they're going to say it does, because you have to look at who those 3 teams were that they lost to. Well, Alabama lost to Oklahoma and got their ass kicked. And they lost to Vanderbilt. So don't tell me who they lost to doesn't matter. It matters as much as who they may have beat. Well, Indiana didn't play anybody. Texas didn't either. Texas got by Georgia twice. They never had a ranked win all year long. And to act as if that they are far superior than anybody else is a false assumption. It just is. They got their ass handed to them twice by Georgia. And they didn't really blow out Clemson. And Clemson was a team that got in because of their ACC championship on a walk-off field goal against SMU. So I do think that matters. Not what Kurt Herbstreit says. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that if you have an 11-1 team and you have a 9-3 or an 8-4 team, and let's say they're from the SEC, because that's what they're implying. Notice they didn't talk about any other team. They talked about SEC teams, like that is the God's given conference. There's no way you subjectively can sit here with any form of criteria and say an 11-1 team can't be in over an 8-4 Ole Miss team because Ole Miss is a better team because of A, B, and C. And because they're 8-4, we don't want you to think of it that way. We want you to think that they're better than what that 11-1 team is. That's a bunch of bullshit. I'm sorry, that's a bunch of bullshit. You have to have a line in the sand where You're not going to consider these other teams because otherwise you'd be doing it all year. I mean, there's no way that you come to a consensus. Now, if you want to sit there and say, we've got a 12-team playoff and we're going to allocate 4 spots to the SEC and 4 spots to the Big Ten, and that's 8, and then there's going to be 2 spots for the ACC and 2 spots for the Big 12, or however you want to do it, then say that's the criteria. We're going to have 4 teams, irregardless of wins and losses, in from the SEC, if that's what they want to do. But that's not what they said. The only teams that got a spot guaranteed were the ones that won the conference championship, and rightfully so. And then you had a bunch of at-large. But when you get to the at-large, you've got to look at things on what a team did, how they did it. And like I've said all year long, when Indiana lined up against Nebraska, Nebraska was 4-1 or 5-1 at the time. It wasn't like they were this shitty team that walked into Memorial Stadium. If they were, Big Noon Kickoff would not have been there at all. So, that didn't fly well. And, College Game Day would not have been there as well. So, disappointed with Kurt. He's taken some heat, rightfully so. I know he backtracked a little bit in what he was trying to say on Pat McAfee's show, and basically just said he wants the best 12 teams. Now, however that happens, I just think, but see, he can't say that. If you want the best 12 teams and you want subjectivity, then you're basically trying to say to them, let us tell you who those at-large teams are. That's essentially what they're saying. We'll tell you who those are, so that Lane Kiffin doesn't cry when he gets beat by Florida the last week of the season, or Alabama doesn't get embarrassed at Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. Let us tell you who we think's better than any other team that you're considering. Now, he's only complaining about Indiana for one simple thing. It says Indiana across his chest. If it had a bigger name on it, if it was Iowa, they wouldn't say boo. If it was Michigan, they wouldn't have said boo. Because Michigan, the year before when they won the national championship, didn't have a great year. But what they're trying to say is, because those teams are loaded with talent, and they are 4 and 5 stars, those teams that are in that category that they feel are far superior than most other teams are the ones that the committee should consider, irregardless of one's record or who they lost to. And that's not right. You've got to use the win and loss column to start the conversation. And I just thought the comments by him and Five Mom were so shallow, and it reeked of the mothership telling them that you need to go out there and advocate more for the SEC because that's who we've taken in this fight, because we're broadcasting all their games now. So I was disappointed. I wholeheartedly disagree with what Kurt Herbstreit is saying or anyone else is saying as it pertains to what they're trying to tell people, because they're not providing a solution. That's the other thing. In his mind, he thought, here's the 12 best teams. And it had to do with Alabama and Ole Miss. Well, the better team out of the SEC, Tennessee, went into Ohio State and got throttled, embarrassed. And you're trying to tell me that they warranted being in the field because they're Tennessee? I just disagree with that. Now, here's what I will say. There is a difference on what Ohio State and normally Michigan or Penn State trots out on the field each and every week. And that's the thing that Indiana and Coach Cignetti has got to do. They've got to figure out ways how they shrink that gap, because those teams are here and Indiana's down here when it comes to overall talent. Now, talent doesn't mean you're going to win 11 games, because we just saw a team that had solid talent and found ways to win games because they played complementary football and they got on a hot streak. But there is a difference between what Notre Dame has got on the sideline than what Indiana has on the sideline. There's a difference, and you can see that difference. But don't besiege a team that maybe doesn't have the talent on paper that the big boys have, and think that that means they're better end all be all, because that's not true. The game is still played between the white lines, and it's a 60-minute ball game, and there's so many things that can happen that would allow a team like Indiana to beat an Ohio State or to beat a Notre Dame. They may have to play perfect, and that's what we said, and they didn't do that, and they got beat. But don't use that saying against them because, Indiana didn't make it close against Ohio State. Well, anybody with their own mind, two eyes, could see that they gave them 14 points, and giving Ohio State 14 points, no matter who it is, it's going to be hard to beat. So that's my rant for the wrapping up of the season, if they want to ask me my opinion. And I'm just disappointed with what Kurt Herbstreit said and how he said it. And he's trying to backtrack a little bit. And I'm sorry, but dude, the committee told you who they thought the best 12 teams were, and they thought Indiana was one of the best 12. And the other teams that were out bitching and moaning about it lost 3 games and lost games they shouldn't have lost 2. And Indiana only lost 1 to Ohio State and beat everybody else, including the Michigan team that ultimately beat Ohio State. So, like Dan Dockage says, suck it. That's what I would tell him, But that is long gone and over with. We shouldn't be harping on what was, because that's now in the past, and we're looking towards the future. And what is lying in the future for the Hoosier football tailgate after the holidays are done and settled, I'll be right back in talking about recruiting and who are some of the top recruits, even in the portal, that Indiana has got coming in once there is a firm foundation with those commitments, and they have been seen by the whites of their eyes on campus. And we'll talk about what it will mean to Indiana heading into the 2025 spring practice, and what they'll need to do to ensure that they're a team that can be thought of as one of the top teams in the Big Ten, not just for 1 year, but multiple years to come. Well, I thank you for joining me here this evening. I wish you and your loved ones a safe and happy holidays, and a happy new year to one and all. May next year be as good as this one. But for now, I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and this has been the Hoosier Football Tailgate right here on Believe.